Alien priest said only gods lift that weapon. Human replied this. From a yard sale bin, Jackson had always thought of himself as an ordinary guy. Just a scavenger in a galaxy full of rare and powerful artifacts. He spent most of his days wandering from one junkyard to the next, picking up anything that might be worth something. But today, something caught his eye. It was an old yard sale, held by an alien merchant who seemed a bit out of place. The merchant's table was cluttered with old tools, rusted weapons, and discarded bits of technology from long-forgotten civilizations. Nothing unusual, just another day in the life of a scavenger. Jackson was about to turn away when a small, glimmering object caught the light. It was half hidden behind a pile of broken gadgets, almost as if it were waiting for him to find it. Curious, Jackson reached down and pulled it out. It was a spear unlike any he had ever seen before. The metal was smooth and shiny, despite the dust that had settled on it. There was a strange symbol etched along the length of the shaft, something he couldn't quite understand. It wasn't like anything from the galaxy's more well-known civilizations. The merchant noticed Jackson examining the spear and shuffled over. His large, bulbous eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost. "Ah, that," he muttered, eyeing Jackson cautiously. "You don't want that." "It's not for sale," Jackson smirked, turning the spear over in his hands. "Looks fine to me," he said. "How much?" The merchant hesitated for a moment, then seemed to recover. 100 credits, he said, though there was something in his voice that suggested the price was far too low for the object in question. Jackson didn't think twice. He tossed the credits onto the table, grabbed the spear, and left without a second glance at the merchant's protest. He walked through the marketplace, holding the spear like it was just another weapon, as if it didn't have the significance the merchant was so eager to avoid. It wasn't until Jackson stepped out into the open air, leaving the marketplace behind, that something strange happened. The spear vibrated in his hands, almost as if it had a life of its own. A low hum began to emanate from the tip, sending a chill up Jackson's spine. He stopped, glancing around to make sure no one was paying attention. It wasn't uncommon for strange objects to react like this. Sometimes artifacts had unknown effects. Still, Jackson had never felt anything quite like this before. The hum grew louder, and suddenly the air around him seemed to shift. The once dull surface of the spear now gleamed with an unnatural light, and for a moment Jackson thought he saw something, an image flashing before his eyes. It was a city, ancient and grand, with towering structures and a sky full of ships. The vision lasted only a second, but it was enough to leave Jackson unsettled. He shook his head, dismissing the thought as a trick of the light or maybe a side effect of too much time in the sun. Shrugging it off, he decided to keep the spear. After all, it was just a weapon, nothing more, nothing less. That's when he heard a voice. "That weapon, it cannot be wielded by just anyone." Jackson spun around, startled by the sudden sound. Standing in front of him was an alien, tall and imposing, dressed in dark robes adorned with intricate symbols. His skin was a pale gray, his eyes dark and piercing. He was staring at the spear with a mixture of awe and fear. The man's voice was low, reverberating with authority. "Only gods may lift that weapon," he said, as if the words themselves were a warning. Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Gods, huh? So what are you, a priest or something?" The alien ignored the question, stepping closer to inspect the spear. He reached out as if to touch it, but then stopped. His eyes locked with Jackson's, and there was a strange intensity in his gaze. "You don't understand the power you hold," the alien said, his voice now tinged with urgency. "That weapon, its power, it's not for mortals." Jackson laughed, turning the spear in his hands casually. "This," he said, his voice dripping with disbelief. "From a yard sale bin?" The alien's expression darkened. "Do not mock what you do not understand. That weapon has the power to reshape worlds and destroy them. It has been lost for millennia. To find it in such a place, it is unheard of." Jackson could see the tension in the alien's posture, the way his hands clenched into fists. "Look, buddy," Jackson said, rolling his eyes. "I don't know who you think you are, but this spear is mine now. I paid for it, so it's mine." The alien's face twisted with frustration, but he quickly regained his composure. "I warned you," he said quietly, turning and walking away. "The gods will come for it. And when they do, they will take it from you." Jackson didn't know what the alien was talking about, but something about the way he spoke made him uneasy. He stared down at the spear again, its hum still vibrating through his hands. Whatever this thing was, it was more than just a weapon. There was something ancient about it, something that made Jackson feel different, but that feeling was fleeting. He shook his head, brushing off the warning as nonsense. People were always saying stuff like that. It was just a weapon. He would figure out what to do with it later. For now, though, Jackson had a strange feeling that the universe had just thrown him into something bigger than he could have imagined. Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The spear, now in his hands, hummed constantly. He had tried to ignore it, but its vibrations were impossible to forget. Every time he moved it, the hum became louder, more intense. The air around him seemed to grow heavier, almost as if it was charged with energy. He wasn't sure what to make of it, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a regular weapon. As Jackson walked through the city streets, he could feel eyes on him. People stared at the spear with a mix of curiosity and fear, but no one dared approach. The alien priest's words echoed in his mind. Only gods may lift that weapon. Jackson had laughed it off earlier, but now it felt less like a joke. He felt a strange sense of unease, as if the world around him was reacting to the spear in ways he couldn't yet understand. He didn't know why, but he felt an urge to test it, to see what it could do. Turning down a quiet alleyway, Jackson set the spear against a nearby wall and took a few steps back. He stared at it for a moment, trying to ignore the way it seemed to pulse with energy. He had no idea what the spear could do, but he wasn't about to let a few strange reactions stop him from finding out. Jackson had always been the type to dive headfirst into anything new, whether it was treasure hunting or trouble. This was no different. With a deep breath, Jackson grabbed the spear again. He raised it above his head and brought it down with a force he didn't know he could muster. The moment the spear hit the ground, a shockwave of energy blasted outward, knocking Jackson off his feet. He hit the ground hard, his vision swimming. The air around him crackled and the ground beneath him trembled. For a few moments, Jackson just lay there, stunned. He had no idea what had just happened. It was like the spear had a mind of its own. It was as if it had reacted to his movement, but in a way that was far more powerful than he could have anticipated. Slowly, he sat up and rubbed his head. His heart was racing. This wasn't normal. As Jackson stood, he noticed something strange. The alleyway was now completely different. The walls were cracked and the ground was scorched. The air felt charged and the distant sounds of the city seemed muffled. He looked back at the spear, still lying on the ground where he had dropped it. This wasn't just some weapon. This was something else entirely. Before Jackson could make sense of what had just happened, he heard a noise. It was faint at first, like the sound of footsteps coming closer. Then a voice, low, commanding, and unmistakable. "You have no idea what you've done." Jackson spun around, his hand instinctively gripping the spear again. The figure standing at the end of the alleyway was tall, cloaked in shadow. There was something about him that was unsettling. The same feeling Jackson had gotten from the alien priest earlier washed over him again. This man, whoever he was no ordinary being. "Who are you?" Jackson demanded, his voice steady, though his hands were shaking slightly. He didn't know what to expect, but this wasn't just another scavenger or bounty hunter. This felt different. The figure stepped forward, and as he did, Jackson could see his face. Pale, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the shadows. The man smiled, but it was a cold, calculating smile. "You hold the celestial spear," the man said. "You don't understand the power you're toying with." Jackson tightened his grip on the weapon. "What do you want with it? You're not taking it from me." The man laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was a laugh of someone who had seen far too much, someone who knew what was coming. "I don't need to take it from you. I'm here to warn you. The gods will come. They will seek what is theirs." Jackson's eyes narrowed. "Gods." "I'm not worried about any gods. I just want to know what this thing does." The man's smile faded, and for a moment he seemed almost sad. "It does more than you can imagine. It's not just a weapon, human. It's a key to powers beyond your understanding." The words hung in the air between them, and Jackson felt a cold shiver run down his spine. A key? What kind of key was this? Before Jackson could respond, the figure stepped forward, his hand reaching out slowly. "Give it to me," he said. "You don't know what you're holding." Jackson instinctively raised the spear, pointing it toward the man. "Stay back." The figure stopped, a strange look in his eyes. "You don't know what you're dealing with, human. That spear. It has the power to destroy civilizations. Entire worlds can be wiped away with a single thought." Jackson's mind raced. Was this some kind of threat, or was it a warning? "I don't care what you say," Jackson replied, his voice firm. "This thing is mine. I'm not handing it over to anyone." The figure seemed to study him for a moment before nodding, as if he had already known how this would go. "Very well," he said. "But mark my words, human, you will regret this." With that, he turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Jackson standing alone in the alleyway, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, Jackson just stood there, staring at the spot where the man had disappeared. He didn't know what to make of it. The man's words echoed in his mind. The gods will come. They will seek what is theirs. Jackson didn't know if he believed in gods. He wasn't even sure what the man had meant by key. But one thing was for sure. He wasn't going to give up the spear without a fight. As he turned to leave the alleyway, the hum of the spear seemed to grow louder. The weight of it in his hands felt different now, heavier, as if it was pulling him towards something. Jackson couldn't explain it, but he felt as though he was on the brink of something much bigger than himself. The universe had just opened a door, and Jackson had no idea what would be on the other side. But he was ready to find out. Jackson walked quickly through the streets, his mind racing. The figure's words haunted him, echoing in his thoughts. The gods will come. They will seek what is theirs. What did that mean? And why had that man been so desperate to get his hands on the spear? The spear hummed softly in his grasp, as if answering his thoughts. Its strange energy seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Jackson tried to ignore it, but the sensation of power swirling around him made it impossible to stay calm. It was like the weapon was alive, pulling him in directions he couldn't understand. He didn't know what he was supposed to do with it. He had only bought the spear on a whim, never imagining it would lead to something like this. But now, things were different. It wasn't just a weapon. It was something far more dangerous, far more important than he could have ever guessed. As Jackson turned a corner, he heard footsteps behind him. His hand instinctively reached for the spear, ready for anything. He turned, and to his surprise, it wasn't the mysterious figure from the alley. Instead, standing in front of him was a group of soldiers, armed, professional, and looking very much like they knew exactly what they were doing. Their leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward. "You have something that belongs to us," he said, his voice cold and commanding. Jackson tightened his grip on the spear. "I don't know what you're talking about." The leader's eyes narrowed. "The celestial spear, it's not meant for your kind, hand it over." Jackson's heart pounded in his chest. These weren't just some random bounty hunters. The way they spoke made it clear they were part of something much bigger. "I'm not giving you anything," Jackson said, his voice steady despite the fear creeping up his spine. The leader nodded, and the soldiers immediately raised their weapons. Jackson's eyes darted around, looking for an escape, but the alley was narrow and the soldiers were closing in fast. He had no choice. With a quick motion, Jackson raised the spear. As he did, the energy inside it flared, sending a shockwave of power through the air. The soldiers froze, the weapons in their hands rattling as if they were caught in some kind of unseen force. Jackson could feel the spear's energy pushing outward, creating a barrier that kept the soldiers at bay. The leader stepped back, his eyes wide with surprise. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he muttered, almost to himself. Then, looking at Jackson with a new kind of fear in his eyes, he gave a sharp command to retreat. The soldiers backed away, lowering their weapons, but they didn't leave. They just stood there watching Jackson like he was some kind of dangerous animal, waiting for the right moment to strike. Jackson stood frozen, the spear in his hands trembling slightly. He had no idea what had just happened, but he could feel the power coursing through him. It was like the weapon was responding to his will, but he didn't know how to control it. It was both thrilling and terrifying at the same time. The leader seemed to sense Jackson's uncertainty and stepped forward again, his tone more cautious now. "You may think you're in control, human, but that weapon, it is far beyond your understanding. It will consume you." Jackson didn't know what to say. He didn't feel consumed. In fact, he felt more alive than he ever had. The power in his hands was intoxicating. It made him feel stronger, more confident, like he could take on anything. But deep down, something told him that this was just the beginning. The soldiers slowly backed away, disappearing into the shadows, but the leader didn't leave. Instead, he turned and walked away without another word. Jackson watched him go, his mind still racing. What had just happened? Who were those soldiers? And why had they wanted the spear so badly? With a deep breath, Jackson let the spear fall to his side. The humming had stopped, but the tension in the air lingered. He knew one thing for sure: the more he held this weapon, the more questions it raised. And Jackson wasn't sure if he was ready for the answers. Later that night, as Jackson sat in his small room at the inn, he tried to make sense of everything. The alleyway confrontation had left him shaken. He had never imagined something like that would happen, let alone that he would be able to defend himself with the spear. But as the hours passed, the unease began to creep back in. What had the leader meant by "consume you"? And what was so special about this spear that entire armies would fight for it? Jackson could feel his pulse quicken as he thought about the figure in the alley. The one who had warned him about the gods. His words still echoed in Jackson's mind. This is no ordinary weapon. The more Jackson thought about it, the more he realized just how little he knew. He had stumbled upon something much bigger than he could have imagined. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Jackson stood up quickly, his hand going instinctively to the spear at his side. He wasn't sure who it was, but he didn't want to take any chances. He opened the door slowly, cautiously, only to find an old woman standing in the hallway. She was hunched over, her eyes covered by a cloth, and she carried a walking stick. Her presence was strange but not threatening. "Are you Jackson?" she asked, her voice raspy and low. Jackson nodded, confused. "Yeah, who are you?" The woman smiled, though it seemed almost sad. "I know what you hold, child, and I know what's coming." Jackson's heart skipped a beat. Another one? He was getting tired of these mysterious figures appearing out of nowhere, each one with cryptic messages about the spear. "What do you want?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The woman's eyes, though covered, seemed to pierce through him. "The gods are real, and they are coming for you." Jackson didn't say anything. He didn't know how to respond to something like that. Gods. What did they want with him? What did they want with the spear? She reached out, her hand trembling, and Jackson stepped back slightly, unsure of what she was about to do. "You must understand, the power of the spear is not for the weak-hearted. If you keep it, you will face consequences beyond your understanding," she said softly, almost as if she were warning him but also preparing him for something inevitable. "They are watching you. They know what you have, and soon you won't be able to escape." Jackson felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He didn't know what to make of this woman, but the fear in her voice told him that whatever was coming, it wasn't good. With a final, lingering look, she turned and walked away, leaving Jackson standing there, more confused than ever. But one thing was clear: this wasn't just about a weapon anymore. This was about something much, much bigger. As Jackson closed the door and turned to sit down, the weight of the spear seemed heavier than before. The gods were coming, and Jackson had no idea how to prepare for what was about to happen. Jackson woke up the next morning feeling a strange weight pressing down on his chest. The events of the night before, meeting the mysterious woman and the warnings about the gods, kept replaying in his mind. He wasn't sure what to believe anymore. The situation had grown far too complicated, and Jackson hated not having answers. The spear was still by his side, resting against the wall. It seemed to pulse in the quiet room as if it was alive, responding to something inside him. Jackson reached for it, feeling its hum vibrate through his fingers. For some reason, it felt heavier today, more intense. He could sense its power more than ever before. The longer he held it, the more it seemed to push him, to pull him into something he wasn't prepared for. He took a deep breath and stood up, grabbing the spear and heading out of the room. He needed to clear his head to think. The streets were bustling with life, and for a moment it almost felt like a normal day. But as Jackson walked through the crowd, he noticed that the whispers followed him. People stared at the spear with fear and awe, some even crossing the street to avoid getting too close. Jackson didn't care. He was used to being an outsider, used to moving through the world with no one paying much attention. But now, with the spear in his hands, everything had changed. He wasn't just another scavenger anymore. He was someone who held the key to something much bigger than himself. As he walked through the marketplace, Jackson's thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice calling his name. He turned to see the alien priest from the previous day, the one who had warned him about the spear. The priest approached quickly, his face tense, his eyes filled with urgency. "You don't understand," the priest said without preamble. "You have no idea what you're holding. That spear, it's more dangerous than you can imagine." Jackson narrowed his eyes, his hand tightening around the spear. "You said that before. What do you want from me?" The priest hesitated for a moment, glancing around as if checking to see if anyone was watching. "I can help you control it, but you must listen to me or you will be destroyed." Jackson frowned, but curiosity got the better of him. Control it? Why do I need to control it? What's the point of all this? I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. The priest's expression softened, and for a brief moment, Jackson saw a flicker of something human in him. You were chosen, the priest said quietly. The spear didn't choose you by accident. You are connected to it in ways you don't yet understand. But the gods, the ones who created the spear, are watching you, and they won't let you keep it forever. Jackson stared at him. The gods, you keep saying that like it means something to me. Who are they? The priest sighed, looking around once more before speaking in a lower voice. They are the ones who once ruled the universe. They created the spear as a symbol of their power, a tool to shape the galaxy. But when they disappeared, they left it behind. The spear was meant to be kept hidden out of the hands of mortals. You, however, have awakened it, and now they will come. Jackson's mind raced as he processed the priest's words. It all sounded like some ancient myth, something out of a story. But everything about the spear, its power, its pull, felt real, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized how little he understood. So, what happens now? Jackson asked, his voice sharp with frustration. Do I just hand it over to you, or to some god? The priest shook his head. No, you must understand how to use it. It's the only way to protect yourself and the universe. Before Jackson could respond, a loud noise echoed through the marketplace. Jackson's heart skipped a beat as he turned to see a group of soldiers marching toward him, their weapons drawn. The leader, the same man from yesterday, was at the front, his expression cold and determined. Step aside, the leader ordered, his voice booming. We've come for the weapon. The priest stepped forward, standing in front of Jackson, his arms raised. You will not take it, he said firmly. This weapon does not belong to you. Jackson instinctively moved to the side, keeping the spear close. His heart was pounding. He didn't know what was happening, but the situation was quickly escalating. The leader of the soldiers sneered, motioning for his men to spread out. You can't stop us, the leader said. We've been sent by the council. That weapon belongs to them. Jackson's grip tightened on the spear, the energy inside it flaring to life once more. He could feel its power coursing through him, filling him with a sense of strength he had never known before. He wasn't sure if it was the weapon itself or his own growing determination, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to give it up. The priest turned to Jackson, his voice urgent. Use it! You must fight back! Jackson took a step forward, raising the spear. As he did, the air seemed to crackle with energy. The soldiers hesitated, their eyes wide with fear. They had seen what the spear could do before, and they didn't want to face it again. The leader, however, wasn't so easily intimidated. He stepped forward, his weapon aimed at Jackson. You don't understand what you're holding, the leader sneered. You think you can control it, you think you can stop the council. Jackson felt a surge of anger, the spear humming in his hands as if it were responding to his emotions. With a sudden movement, he thrust the spear forward, and a blast of energy shot from the tip, striking the ground in front of the soldiers. The shockwave sent them flying backward, their weapons knocked from their hands. The leader, stunned by the display of power, stumbled backward. His eyes were wide with shock. What are you? Jackson didn't answer. He wasn't sure what he was anymore. But he knew one thing: he couldn't let these people take the spear. Not now, not ever. He turned to the priest, who was watching him with a mixture of awe and fear. What do I do now? Jackson asked, his voice shaky but determined. The priest looked at him, his expression unreadable. Now you face the gods, and you must be ready. Jackson didn't know what that meant, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't backing down. The spear was his now. And he would use it to protect himself, to survive whatever was coming. As the soldiers regrouped, their fear palpable, Jackson stood tall, holding the spear in front of him like a shield. He wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but he was ready for whatever came. The gods may be coming, but Jackson was no longer afraid. He was ready to face them head-on. The streets were quieter now. Jackson stood alone in the marketplace, the weight of the spear heavier in his hands than it had ever been. The soldiers had retreated, but Jackson could still feel their eyes on him. The priest had vanished, leaving Jackson with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear now: this weapon, this spear, was no ordinary relic. It was something far more powerful, something that could change everything. Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling out of control. The energy from the spear was still alive in his hands, pulsing with a strange power that seemed to resonate with the very air around him. He knew that he couldn't keep running. No matter how much he wanted to, he couldn't escape the path that had been set before him. The gods were coming, the council wanted the spear, and now the consequences of his choices were unavoidable. As Jackson walked through the streets, he kept his head down, trying to blend in. But the whispers followed him, the stares of those who recognized the spear burning into his skin. He could feel the tension building. It wasn't just the soldiers anymore, it was everyone. Everyone knew what he held. He turned down a narrow alley, hoping for a moment of quiet. The hum of the spear seemed to grow louder, filling his ears. Jackson stopped and looked at the weapon. There was no mistaking it now, it was alive. He didn't know how or why, but the spear was connected to him in a way that he couldn't explain, and it was beginning to change him. He wasn't the same person he had been when he first found the spear in that yard sale bin. The power that surged through him now was more than just physical. It was something else, something that made him feel both unstoppable and terrified. "I can't do this alone," Jackson muttered to himself. He knew he needed help, but he wasn't sure who to trust. The priest had spoken of the gods, but Jackson still didn't understand what they were or why they cared about the spear. And the soldiers from the council. They were after the weapon, but what did they want with it? Suddenly, Jackson heard footsteps approaching. His hand instinctively gripped the spear tighter, ready for whatever came next. He wasn't sure if he was ready for another confrontation, but he couldn't back down, not now. A figure appeared at the end of the alley, walking toward him. It was the same woman from the night before, the one who had warned him about the gods. Jackson stiffened, ready to react, but instead of the cold warning he had expected, the woman's expression was one of concern. "You're still holding it," she said quietly, her voice calm but filled with an underlying urgency. "I don't have a choice," Jackson replied, his voice strained. "It's mine now, and I'm not giving it up." The woman nodded slowly, stepping closer. "You don't have to. But you do have to understand what's at stake. This weapon is not just a tool, it's a key to something far greater than you realize." Jackson's brow furrowed. "A key to what?" The woman hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. "A key to the return of the gods. They are coming, and when they do, they will not be merciful. You cannot face them alone. You must understand the power of the spear before they arrive." Jackson shook his head, frustration rising. "I don't understand any of this. What do you want from me?" "You keep saying the gods are coming, but what does that even mean? Why me?" The woman's expression softened, and she took a step closer. "You were chosen," she said gently. "Chosen to wield the spear, chosen to face the gods. The spear has always been meant for someone like you, someone who can channel its power, but you are not ready, not yet." "Then how do I get ready?" Jackson asked, his voice filled with desperation. "How do I control this thing? How do I stop the gods from coming for it?" The woman studied him for a moment before speaking again. "There is a place, a temple hidden deep in the mountains. It is the last remnant of the gods' power where their secrets are kept. If you go there, you may find the answers you need, but it will not be easy. Many will try to stop you. The gods will send their agents, and the council will not rest until they have the spear." Jackson looked at the woman, his mind racing. He had no idea if he could trust her, but right now, she seemed to be the only person who had answers. The weight of the spear was unbearable, and the thought of facing the gods alone was terrifying. "I'll go," he said finally, his voice steady despite the uncertainty flooding his mind. "I don't have any other choice." The woman nodded, her expression grave. "It's the only way. But be warned, Jackson, this path will change you. The power of the spear will change you. You must be prepared for that." Jackson didn't reply. Instead, he turned and began walking away, the spear at his side. The woman watched him for a moment, then turned and disappeared into the shadows. As Jackson made his way toward the mountains, he felt the weight of the spear pressing down on him more than ever. The gods were coming, and soon he would have to face them, but he didn't know how. The only thing he knew for sure was that he couldn't face this alone. He needed to find the temple. He needed answers. The journey was long, and Jackson couldn't help but feel like he was being watched. He had no idea who or what was out there, but he could sense it. Something was waiting for him. The hum of the spear grew louder as he climbed higher, the power within it seeming to grow stronger with every step. When he finally reached the temple, it was just as the woman had described. A massive, ancient structure, half buried in the rock. The stone was covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Jackson stepped forward, feeling the spear pulse in his hands as if urging him onward. He entered the temple cautiously, the silence around him overwhelming. The air was thick with the weight of history, and every step seemed to echo off the stone walls. Inside, the temple was filled with strange carvings and relics, each one seeming to hold a piece of the puzzle Jackson was trying to solve. At the center of the temple, he found an altar, a large stone slab covered in dust and overgrown with vines. The spear seemed to vibrate as he approached, almost as if it recognized its purpose. Jackson hesitated for a moment, then placed the spear on the altar. The moment his hands left the weapon, the ground shook. The air around him seemed to warp and distort, and Jackson stumbled back, his heart racing. Something was happening, something big. A voice echoed through the temple, deep and resonant. "You have come, human. You have awakened the spear, but now you must choose." Jackson's breath caught in his throat. The voice sounded ancient, powerful, and for a moment he felt like he was standing at the edge of something he couldn't understand. "Choose," he asked, his voice trembling. "Choose what?" The voice answered, its tone filled with both sorrow and finality. "Choose whether to wield the spear and face the gods, or to surrender it and let the universe fall into chaos. Your decision will shape the future of all." Jackson's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of the choice settled over him. He had come this far, but now the path ahead was uncertain. What would he choose? What was the right choice? He didn't know. But one thing was clear. Whatever happened next, he was no longer just a scavenger. He was something more, something that would either save or destroy everything.